Hi, I'm Lynn and you're listening to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm a former journalist and the author of 9 books, a writing coach, and a marketing expert. In this show, I interview authors and people in publishing about how they find inspiration, how they build their brands and choose their publishing paths, and most of all, how they find meaning in the mundane. If you want to learn more about how to get your writing career off the ground, visit my website, lynnegaladner.com, and check out the classes, programs, and retreats that I offer. And if you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts or on any podcast platform where you find the Make Meaning podcast. I hope these stories give you the courage and confidence to make your writing dreams come true. Thanks for listening. Brenda Meller is a self-proclaimed ambassador of LinkedIn. She's also a national speaker and chief engagement officer at Meller Marketing, where she helps business professionals enjoy a bigger slice of the LinkedIn pie. Brenda worked in corporate marketing before going out on her own, and in January of 2021, she published her first book, Social Media Pie: How to Enjoy a Bigger Piece of the LinkedIn Pie. In 2022, Brenda produced an audiobook version of the book, and in 2023, she launched her podcast, Enthusiastically Self-Employed. I've known Brenda for a lot of years, dating back to when she was my contact person at a business college that was a client of my marketing company, Your People LLC. We've been friends now for a long time, and in fact, Brenda was a guest early on in the Make Meaning podcast, and you'll find the link to that episode in the show notes. I love her energy, her passion for her work, and her generosity in helping people grow and evolve and build skills that build their businesses. Today, I'm excited to welcome Brenda Meller back to the Make Meaning podcast. Well, Brenda Meller, welcome to the Make Meaning podcast again.
It's a delight to be back with you and to be chatting with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lynn.
Yes, I'm so happy to see you and glad to get you back on the show. You were one of my early guests, and you've done so much in the years since. It's been almost 5.5 years since I launched the podcast. So it's great to have you back for a second interview. And, you've worn a lot of hats in your career, Brenda. So I was wondering which one has been your favorite and why?
Well, I'm going to talk about from a career perspective, because my favorite hat would have to be mom, of course. But from a career perspective, my favorite hat would have to be that of entrepreneur.
Uh-huh.
I'm very appreciative for the corporate career that I had, and I loved working as corporate and in corporate marketing and everything. But I think being on this side, it's like once you've had a taste of being self-employed and you've had the chance to be successful at it and learn from it and grow from it. I don't know about you, but I don't think I could ever go back to corporate. It's just such a fulfilling thing being self-employed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's just now, you can do it. And there are just so many things you can do that it's like the sky's the limit. So, why would you put yourself in a box when you can have multiple boxes, So I think that's really exciting. On the Make Meaning podcast, which has evolved since we launched it in 2018, I now focus on interviewing authors and people in publishing. So when you were a guest before, the mandate was broader. It was really, I was looking for people who find meaning and purpose in work and in life. And I do think that still applies. Even as I look to interview authors and people in the publishing industry and about the publishing journeys. So I just wonder today how you define yourself professionally. Is it as author? Is it as social media coach? As, I don't know. How do you think of yourself first and foremost?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because I think this is an important point to make from a marketing perspective. It's not your audience's job to know what you do. It's your job to remind them about that. And when you're self-employed, you often go on this journey of self-discovery and of market discovery, and you figure out what you enjoy to do and where there is a market for and a demand for your expertise and services. When I first started out my business, Meller Marketing, I was doing social media strategy, which included social media management, focusing on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was also doing marketing strategy. So I was helping businesses with marketing plans and event plans and things like that. And then LinkedIn was as a niche. I always enjoyed LinkedIn, but it was it was a subset, but it wasn't a primary focus.
Mm-hmm.
And as my business has changed and it was like going from 2019 into 2020, I realized that I wanted to go all in on LinkedIn. no
Mhm.
pun intended there. But I realized if I really got super focused on the area of expertise, helping people and businesses with LinkedIn, team training, presentations, my book, everything,
Mhm.
that I could be more successful because it was really a niche offering. And then the pandemic hit, and then, everything kind of got thrown up in the air and you had to juggle things for a while.
Uh-huh.
But even now, I'm still continuing to grow and evolve my business. But primarily what I do right now, Lynn, is I help business professionals, solopreneurs, and job seekers to get a bigger slice of the LinkedIn pie.
Okay.
That occurs through one-on-one training and coaching. It occurs through my online courses. My readers, learn from me
Yeah.
for my book, Social Media Pie. And I've also got a podcast called Enthusiastically Self-Employed right now.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it all dovetails, like everything you're doing relates and it's all sort of, this niche, which I think is really smart to just, and I always tell people that this is true for writing as well. But, when you really narrowly focus, even though it's about your experience or a very specific piece of the pie, then, your audience finds it more relatable. If you're too broad or too vague, it's really hard to relate. And so I think it's great that you found what you loved and that you could help people through that as well. And I'm imagining that that is what led to your idea to write a book. And I wonder if the pandemic played into that too. So tell me a little bit about Social Media Pie, the book, the title, how did you come to this? And then we'll talk a little bit about the writing journey too.
Yeah, and the book had been on my bucket list for many years.
Hmm.
Probably since around the time that I became self-employed at the end of 2017, going into 2018.
Hmm.
And the more, if you're a speaker, the more that you speak, the more likely you'll get that question of people coming up to you afterwards saying, "Wow, this is a great talk. Where can I buy your book? Do you have any books? Are your
Right.
books on Amazon?" And I would always say, "Oh, someday I'll write it someday." And it was like a someday type of a thing. And it's actually kind of ironic. So at the end of 2019, I was invited by a friend who met me through LinkedIn. He found me through LinkedIn originally, and he was organizing a conference, an annual writing conference through the Rochester Writers Group. And he said, "Hey, can you come out to our conference and speak to authors about LinkedIn?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, actually, I want to become an author myself. So maybe this is a great place for me to get exposed to that."
Yeah.
But that kind of catapulted the start of the book writing journey. But
Okay.
in terms of the name of the book, that actually started back in 2018 when I was doing a presentation. It was for the Sterling Heights Chamber.
Hmm.
And as you know, Lynn, sometimes you just get bored with your slide deck and you're like, I want to mix it up. I want to try something different. And I
Uh-huh.
was doing a presentation on social media strategies for businesses and for individuals. And I decided to do a pie theme.
Uh-huh.
So one slide was like a picture of bananas, and the next slide was banana cream pie. And then it was a
Okay.
picture of apples and apple pie. And at the end of the presentation, I think I had a box and I passed it around the room. Everybody dropped their business card in, and I drew a name and I gave away a pie. Like I
Oh,
stopped at Grand Traverse Pie on the way and I bought a pie and
uh-huh.
I gave away. And I remember the woman who won the pie was like, she won the lottery. Like, "Oh my gosh, I never won anything." And throughout the presentation, it was about social media and it was a pie theme. So I created a hashtag, social media pie. And I
Okay.
encouraged people throughout to take pictures, to post, to tweet,
Hmm.
wherever they wanted to share them. And they did. And they did not just that day, but like for days and weeks afterwards. And there was
Hmm.
actually somebody in the room who did a blog about it. And she called it Social Media Pie, the event.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I did what any smart marketer would do at the time, Lynn, because I'm like, I'm onto something. I don't know exactly what, but social media pie is not something that anybody owns. So
Yeah.
I went on to all the major social media properties and reserved the name social media pie. And then
Okay.
I bought the web domain socialmediapie.com. If you look it up
Okay.
right now, it redirects to Meller Marketing. And I
Okay.
really had no intention of doing anything other than just reserving it because nobody else really owned it.
Hmm.
It was from that day forward, I realized that pie and weaving that into my personal brand,
Hmm.
it helped to differentiate me.
Yeah.
And when I sat down to write the book, there's a lot of LinkedIn books out there. I like,
Yeah.
how can I do something different? I
Hmm.
said, I'm going to make this a book called Social Media Pie. And I polled my audience and we thought of subtitles together, but the subtitle ended up being How to Enjoy a Bigger Slice of LinkedIn.
That's
So that was
awesome.
the tie into it.
I absolutely love the title. And it's funny because, I've known you for years and I felt like, oh, you must really like pie. Like I thought it was just like your favorite food or something, which actually it's my husband's favorite dessert,
Yeah.
which is funny because I am not a pie person usually and I'm very bad at making them. So, but I love this story because I think it shows your marketing savvy, but it's fun and it's memorable and like clearly everybody jumped on board. I mean, I think that's super smart. So I love that story. Thank you for that. So tell me a little bit about the process of writing the book. Like, how long did it take? What was your writing practice? Just tell me about that.
Yeah, so even leading up to this, I always really enjoyed writing and content writing and doing blogs and things like that. So from time to time, I would do a blog, and sometimes the blog was on LinkedIn in their article section. Sometimes it was on my website. So I had like a collection of topics already that I was thinking I could probably draw from. So that conference that I spoke at, the Rochester Writers Conference, after I
Hmm.
did my talk, which was on using LinkedIn as an author, afterwards, as is common with many of us who are speakers, after you're done speaking and the thrill kind of like everybody walks up to you and they talk to you, and then you're like, I just need to not talk to anybody. So I went and sat out in the lobby. It was at Oakland University. I was sat out in the lobby and I was sitting there kind of checking my phone and just, not being around people. And I noticed a couple couches away, there's a gentleman who was in my room, and
Hmm.
we made eye contact. And I said, hey, and I said, were you in there? And he said, yeah, that was good. And I said, did you walk away with some new insights on LinkedIn? And he said, yeah. And we got into a conversation. Turns out he was there also as a speaker. He was on a panel, and
Uh-huh.
he had written a book called How to Write a Book in 30 Days. Like, I
Ooh.
was meant to be at that conference and to meet this guy. His name's Don Staley.
Uh-huh.
And his book was for sale at the front table, and immediately went out and bought a copy of this book. And
Hmm.
then I read it in a weekend. I mean, that has really got me started on the process. And his whole book is based on the concept that anybody can write a book in 30 days, but what it
Yeah.
takes is time and dedication. You need to
Yeah.
commit to sitting down and carving out, whether it's a half hour or an hour of your day.
Hmm.
And as we are discussing this, we're in November, which I think they still do is it,
NaNoWriMo.
what's the acronym? You probably know it.
It's NaNoWriMo and it's National Novel Writing Month.
Right.
Yes.
So you
Yep.
can write a novel in
In,
the
in a
month of
month.
November.
Yes.
And as luck would have it, it was in the month of November, but I didn't intentionally line it up with that. But
Yeah.
what I did do at the beginning of the process is I announced it. I said, okay, I'm doing this. So,
Hmm.
and I told people on social media, I said, if you see me, ask me how my book writing is coming along. So I started with, using his methodology. The first draft is really like, don't edit and censor yourself. So I started with an outline,
Hmm.
and then every day I sat down to write a chapter of the book. And I didn't even go in order. Then I knew what the outline was going to be, but sometimes I
Hmm.
wrote chapter 1, and then I went to 17, and then I went back to 6, and then I went to
Hmm.
23. So I
Hmm.
jumped around a little bit, sometimes pulling from blogs and then refreshing them to make them a chapter,
Sure.
other times writing it from scratch. But every single day I wrote, and I think it ended up being like 30 days plus 5 days, but I
Okay.
got it done. I think
That's
that's it.
amazing. That is so cool. I absolutely love this. And, how did it feel when you were doing it? Was it like exhilarating, or did the writing also lead you to write more because like you got more comfortable with it, more confident about it?
I always enjoyed writing, and even when I was younger, I would journal a lot, and I really
Hmm.
enjoyed writing. And now I think it's a lot easier, especially if you're a good typist, if you can type fast. Like, I
Hmm.
can type faster than I can write in a
Hmm.
journal.
Hmm.
So for me, sometimes I would be working in my home office, door closed. I would tell the family I'm writing for an hour, don't interrupt me. Other times I would get to the end of the day and I hadn't written yet. So I had a laptop, I would bring up to bed with me, and I had actually, the moms out there can appreciate this. The boppy pillows that you have when you're nursing your little ones, I would have the
Yes.
boppy on my lap in my bed with the laptop propped up against me. And I know there's probably like laptop pillows you could use, but it was kind of cool having the boppy, very
Yes.
comforting. And
Yeah.
I would write for a half hour. And
Hmm.
every day I would write for a half hour. So I would say, in terms of how do I feel, I felt like I was committed to reaching a goal. Some days I'll admit it felt like a chore, like, oh, like, I don't know if you remember
Hmm.
that time to make the donuts
Yeah.
commercial, like
Yep.
time to write the chapter. Other days, especially I think at the beginning and the end of the process, the beginning you have momentum. At the end of the
Hmm.
process, I'm almost done. I'm coming to
Yeah.
the tail end of it. But
Yeah.
there were days where it felt like more of a chore to get it done, but I knew I was working towards something that was a goal that I set for myself.
Yeah.
So I always enjoyed the process, and sometimes it would give me the chance to revisit some topics I had talked about in the past about
Hmm.
LinkedIn, and kind
Hmm.
of look at what's changed since then.
Yeah. And I love that you just did a half hour a day because for our listeners, I think it's really important to emphasize that you don't have to write for 5 hours. You can just do 30 minutes and like it's significant. And in 35 days, you had a book, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it manageable and like achievable. Like somebody can listen to this and say, okay, I can get started. And in a month or so, I can have it done. So, and if you have a boppy pillow, it makes it even easier. So that's awesome. I love that.
But like it's like once your kids grow up, you start getting like the rocking chair and this and that and all the clothes. And there's a couple little things that I hold here, and there are a couple books and outfits and stuff. But the Bobby is actually, it's a really good laptop. If you're sitting on either the couch or in your bed and you want to have something propped up, it's
Yep.
like a good height, and it removes the heat from the laptop from you. And it's not hard like those desks things that they have. So I
Yep.
don't know. It's a
I
nice
love
little,
it. I love it. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's so cool. So I'm curious, about the content of the book because I know social media is ever evolving and I know you're an expert on LinkedIn and so you're always an early adopter and what's the latest thing. So I'm wondering if that means you have to update the content of the book periodically as LinkedIn evolves and you have more, tips and techniques and stuff. Has that been something that you're like constantly doing to the book?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that because even like when I was writing the book, it's LinkedIn is a moving target. LinkedIn never
Yeah.
just stops developing. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, as we sit here and we're talking, one of my friends, he's a LinkedIn coach as well, Kevin D. Turner, and he is
Mm-hmm.
always collecting like when LinkedIn does updates to the platform to features, either rolling out or retiring new features.
Mm-hmm.
And as of today, I think LinkedIn has made 150 changes to the platform in the year 2023.
Oh my
Now, some
gosh.
of them are significant and others are, things that they've tried, they've rolled out, and then there's usually like 5 phases of them doing a rollout. So sometimes it makes it to phase 1 and they say, nope, we're not going to do it. And sometimes it rolls out to phase 5, which is everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I was getting ready to publish the book, it was in 2020. And I actually, even though I wrote it in the last month of 2019, the book finally published and was made available to people in December of 2020. So it took a little bit
Mm-hmm.
longer to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But from the time that I wrote it to the time that I published, LinkedIn made some changes, and there was a pretty significant overhaul in the privacy and settings area that occurred like I think about 2 months before I went to print. So at
Mm-hmm.
that point, I had to like stop the press, stop the process. It wasn't at the press yet, but I
Yeah.
had to go through and make changes. But anywhere that I would identify inside the book, Lynn, like if I was talking about a specific feature and where to click and how to access it, I would start
Mm-hmm.
with this was available as of the time of publishing. Now, have I thought about refreshing the book? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're sitting on video right now. This is audio only, but behind me on my bookshelves, I've got some
Mm-hmm.
copies of my books over here.
Yes, I
And
see.
I do fulfill through Amazon, but I also have a local publisher where I can order print
Mm-hmm.
quantities. And I think I've got maybe around 60 or so books left at the time right now.
Mm-hmm.
Once those are done, I'm not ordering anymore. And then I'll think about second edition. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you, I think the people that bought the first edition,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm really focusing on is LinkedIn strategies. It's not like an A to Z of everything that's on the platform. It's
Mm-hmm.
more how to get more out of LinkedIn.
Sure.
So even if this area inside your profile is different, the strategies I've covered in book 1 haven't really changed.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's like if you go to the grocery store for milk,
Mm-hmm.
they still sell milk. It might be in a different aisle than it used to be. It might be in a different area of the store.
Mm-hmm.
So things are still there. The functionality and the features are still there. So I don't think I don't know, maybe when I get to edition 2, I might look at
Mm-hmm.
changing some other things in the book as well. But what I'm looking at instead is launching different iterations of the book. Whereas the
Mm-hmm.
first one was focused more holistically on LinkedIn strategy for people
Mm-hmm.
already on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at a company pages
Mm-hmm.
feature for the book. And then I'm also considering some different editions as well, like maybe LinkedIn for solopreneurs
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
some other iterations of it. So
Yeah.
still to be determined at this point.
That's pretty cool. I wrote a book in, I think it was 2012, and it was the first book I self-published. Everything else I had written up until 2023 was published by other publishers. And it was a sort of DIY PR and marketing book because I felt like there were plenty of clients that I could not take on. Didn't have the budget, but I wanted to give them something that would help them. And so it was really strategic and it went into specifics on different social media platforms, but also big picture strategy, like you said. And I always feel like, it shouldn't even be out there because it's like, well, now it's 11 years later, but it's like, I think the strategy, yeah, that still applies, but the details about the platforms are out of date, and that's a hard thing with social media because the technology is always evolving. So I love your approach to it because, it still resonates and then you can give yourself some time and some grace to like get to the next version of the book or, whatever. You can also even consider doing like a little, addendum or appendix that you put out there. So it's like people who have book 1 could just add this in or something,
Right.
and then it's not the whole thing. It's just part of it,
It's interesting too, because the front of my book has a piece of pie. It's a piece of apple pie. It's like a lattice crumb thing on the front.
Hmm.
And I think like when I do a second edition, because I think there will be a second edition, a refresh of it,
Hmm.
it'll be a different slice of pie. It might be
Okay.
blueberry next time, or cherry,
Nice.
or lemon meringue or something. So if you were to buy the book, it might actually become a collectible type of thing. You've got all the different types of pie that are on the front cover of it, and that
Yeah.
could help to visually distinguish it as well.
I love that. That's so cute. I love it. What has feedback been like from people who've bought the book? And, tell me about any of the reviews you've gotten too.
Yeah, and this is, I'm a marketer, so this is like part of my process was when I did the pre-sale. This is during the pandemic, so we had like masks, and we did get photos with people, wearing the book. But then immediately after I delivered them, I requested permission, of course, to email them. And then a month after delivery, I would send them a link and I would say, "Can you give me a review on Amazon?" And now people from my website, they automatically are opted into that email sequence, if they buy it directly from me, to
Hmm.
do the review on Amazon. And anytime I do get somebody who reaches out to me that says they're enjoying the book, I ask the question, "Hey, would you feel comfortable giving me a review on Amazon?" And I give them the direct link to help to go there.
Uh-huh.
And then I also merchandise those reviews. So in terms of what people say, I mean, what they're saying is, they're enjoying, they're getting some great strategies, things that are
Hmm.
actionable. It's not like a beginner book. It's really meant to open your eyes to the different possibilities and the ways of using LinkedIn. And my
Hmm.
approach is based on social selling principles.
Hmm.
So understanding how to develop relationships with people, develop your personal brand, how to use the different features inside the profile to their maximum capability to get you the best type of results. And that's what a lot of the feedback was focused on,
Hmm.
combined with, if you read throughout the book, I do a lot of shout outs of people. At the
Hmm.
beginning of every chapter, I have a quote related to pie.
Hmm.
Whether it's a TV show or movie or something. And at the end of every chapter, for a while, I was really asking people, when you invite me to connect, tell me your favorite pie in your invitation.
Okay.
And people would invite me to connect and they would say, "My favorite pie is apple or peach or pecan." And they would tell me like why. They wouldn't just tell me the pie, they would tell me why, because it was my
Hmm.
grandma that made it, or we have this every year at the holidays. So got like, I don't know, 20 or so chapters in the book. I should know that number. But at the
Hmm.
end of every chapter, I have one of those little snippets,
Uh-huh.
"Hi, my name's Lynn and my favorite kind of pie is pecan."
Uh-huh.
And then I would give a shout out to Lynn and I would put her LinkedIn URL in. So then when I
Oh,
published the book, it was another little bonus way of trying to jumpstart potential readers, or people buying the book.
yeah.
I would say,
Yeah.
"Hey," I would email everyone and I said, "Hey, Lynn, I wanted to let you know that you're the featured shout out and at the end of chapter 22, page 223,
Uh-huh.
when you invited me to connect and you said you liked pecan pie. It's referenced in the book.
Wow.
Here's the link to purchase it on Amazon or to purchase it on my website if you're interested."
I love
And
it.
some people did, and some people said, they just said, "Oh, that's so cool. Thanks for letting me know." And that was it.
Hmm.
But I think, that was part of my approach, is I wanted to make this feel like it was a community focused book. It wasn't just about me and my love
Yeah.
of pie, but it was also about my readers and their love of pie as well.
That's cool. The consummate networker every step of the way. I love it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your publishing journey. I know that you decided to publish this yourself, and I love that you used a local printer for hard copies, but also used Amazon. And so why did you want to publish it yourself, and how has that worked for you? How did you find the local printer even? I think that's fabulous.
Yeah. So I did work with a self-publishing coach, and that was the guy that I met at the conference, Don Staley. He was the author of the book, How to Write a Book in 30 Days.
Hmm.
And I shopped around because I was at the point where it felt very intimidating writing a
Hmm.
book. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And proofreaders and editors and ISBN numbers, all these. I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Uh-huh.
So I did shop around, and it wasn't the cheapest, but he wasn't the most expensive. I had
Okay.
I think it was a 3 or 4 month package working with him, which included a shipment of 200 books as well,
Uh-huh.
and working directly with him on the first order with
Hmm.
the print house. And then he kind of made the exchange so that I work with them directly.
Hmm.
So working, I guess, I think that would probably be considered a hybrid model. And I don't know if that's what I called it at the time, if it
I
was
don't know. It
self-publishing.
might be. I mean, hybrid is where they do everything for you and you
Okay.
pay them a fee and they get it out there. So if you just said, here you go, and then they did the layout, copyright, the whatever,
Yeah.
then yeah. But if they were coaching you to do it yourself, it might just be self-publishing.
I think it was more of a self-publishing, but
Okay.
it was self-publishing, but with a coach.
Okay.
And when we published the book, it's actually under the name of his business. Now, at the
Okay.
time, I didn't really, I mean, I still own all the licenses and rights and
Sure.
everything to it. And I think because he had a process for setting up the ISBN numbers, it's probably a lot easier than I think it's going to be. But in my head, I'm
Yeah.
like, he said, I'll do it under mine, or we can do it under your. I go, no, go ahead and do it under yours. Like, I didn't really
Hmm.
care. It wasn't that
Yeah.
important to me. Could I do it on my own? Probably, but I
Yes.
still feel like I've only have one book under my belt. I would probably still work with someone else. I'm not sure if Don's still working with people. When I go back for my second book, I'll probably reach out to him again and ask the question. But
Yeah.
I think it's just there's a lot of things that can feel very intimidating about the process. And yeah, you certainly can do it all on your own, but you don't want to mess things up. And he helped me even like getting an Amazon author page set up and then uploading the files in the correct way. And I had a couple hiccups in the process where Amazon kept kicking it back and saying, no, this is declined. And
Hmm.
I don't even know what it was at the time, Lynn. I was like, I was just frustrated. And I reached out to Don and got him on the phone and we look at it together. He's like, okay, this is what you need to, like, he knew because he'd been
Yeah.
through the process with so many other authors before.
Sure. Sure.
So, I think it can be intimidating, but that shouldn't be what's holding somebody back. If you're listening and you're like, I don't want to do this because I don't know what to do, there's a
Hmm.
lot of experts and resources and things out there that you can use to guide yourself through if you want to go through the process, or you can hire someone to be your coach or to work with you to go through the process too.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I wrote my first novel, which came out this year, I did query a little bit to agents and publishers, and I actually even was offered a contract, and I turned it down. I didn't think it was a good contract because in my gut, I wanted to do it myself. I wanted creative control, and it has become so high quality and so accepted to self-publish these days. And so I did create a hybrid press, Scotia Road Books, so that I could help women over 40 with strong voices if they're publishing. But it really wasn't my desire to necessarily create another business. It was just, I wanted to figure out the process, and I used myself as a guinea pig. And it is much easier than you think. And once you do it, you can do it again more easily. And there's so many resources and other people who are happy to give you advice and be in your community. And so I think that's super cool. It makes writing a book much more accessible for everybody. And so the hardest part really is writing that book, which you
Yeah.
just made very easy. And I love that's an example and an inspiration for our listeners. So now I know you also did an audiobook version. So tell me about that decision and that process too.
Well, that was always in the back of my mind that I would do an audio version of the book. And probably the moment I first started talking about having a book and it was going to be a printed book, I immediately would have people saying, is there going to be an audiobook version of it? Because, some people just prefer
Yeah.
audiobooks over printed books, or they want the e-reader version of it
Hmm.
over printed books. So I knew I wanted to do it, and I knew I wanted to be the voice of it.
Hmm. I love
Because I don't
that.
know about you, Lynn, but I've read books from people that it wasn't the author, and it
Hmm.
feels, to me, it would feel scripted and acted. And I
Yeah.
think that probably works well with fiction books because you have
Hmm.
people that do voiceovers for a living and they can like act things out. But
Hmm.
I feel like for nonfiction books, and especially this is a business book, and I'm very comfortable being on video and speaking and doing LinkedIn lives and interviews and things like that. So
Yeah.
for me, it didn't feel natural to think even about outsourcing it.
Sure.
So it was probably about a year after I did the printed book that I sat,
Hmm.
and because it was one of those, I'll get to it someday. I'll get to it someday. And then I had a couple of friends who went through and they converted their books to audiobooks, and I started reaching out. I'm like, how do you do this? Because then it's intimidating. You think
Yeah.
about the audio quality and what kind of microphone, and then when you submit it to Audible and all these other outlets, like, what do you need to know? Like, you don't know what you know, what
Yeah.
you need to know until you go through the process. So I asked around again. I found somebody who was an audiobook coach. His name
Hmm.
is Dave Stokes. He's in
Hmm.
Australia. So we did
Okay.
have a little bit of a time zone thing, where sometimes it was late at night for me, early in the morning and him, or vice versa. But what I did working with him is he helped me to understand the audio settings and learning tools like Audacity and
Okay.
learning about how to format your audio file so that they would get accepted.
Okay.
And then once I had everything done, he did kind of a pass on everything, made sure it was clean and ready to go. And then he submitted it, and he actually set up an account on, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the outlet right now. It was something like an author's outlet. And it was almost similar to a podcast. When you publish a podcast, you push it through once and then it distributes to multiple network. So he
Okay.
created like an audiobook version of that for me and distributed it to multiple networks for me.
Hmm.
Now, Is the audiobook a huge moneymaker for me? No.
Okay.
I don't even know if I've made my money back on working with that coach through the audiobook,
Uh-huh.
but I've gone through the process and I did it, and it was probably a lot less expensive because I didn't outsource, the voiceover part of it either.
Yeah, yeah. I'm planning to do my own audio for Woman of Valor. And so I just need to identify like a few days consecutively that I'm not doing anything else and I can just rest my voice and just do the recordings. So, but I do have a virtual assistant who will help with the editing and packaging and all that stuff. So I just feel like if you have a podcast voice, if you know how to podcast, then you know how to do an audiobook. And so yes, I agree with you. I think that's exciting and it's great to have it in so many formats because some people really only have time for audiobooks. They don't have time to sit down and open the hardcover. So it's great to have those options for sure. Do you have plans for not just another version of this book, but another book in time, do you think? Or
I do. I actually am looking over my shoulder right now because I've got a Post-it note. I'm a Post-it note gal, so I've got Post-it notes with ideas. And right now I have 4 books. Social Media Pie Volume 2 is the top of the list. I'm not sure if it'll be the next one. I have a company pages book on my mind. I want to write a book called Enthusiastically Self-Employed, which is the same name as my podcast, to talk
Mhm,
about the journey from corporate employee to being self-employed
mhm.
and to offer advice and inspiration to people who are kind of following in my footsteps, or maybe thinking about making that move. And
Yeah.
then eventually I do want to do one that's focused on job seekers as well,
Mhm.
using LinkedIn as a job seeker. And
Nice.
I've focused a lot on working with people. I like to call them experience rich.
Uh-huh.
I have a program called Boot Camp with Brenda, which is designed for people who are age 40, 50, 60 plus looking for a
Mhm,
job using LinkedIn. So
mhm.
I think there's a special audience of people out there that would benefit from a book of me on that topic. So at least 4 ideas right now.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to read all of them. That sounds great. It's funny when you say 40, 50, 60. I remember when my dad was alive, I mean, maybe in his 70s, it might have been late 60s or early 70s. And he'd always been an entrepreneur. And so he never had to make a resume. And he had, sold his company or closed it. And he was consulting for a long time. And then he decided he wanted to find other consulting opportunities. And so I said, okay, let's get you on LinkedIn, which I did. And I said, I want to do your profile for you. So like, do you have a resume? And he's like, I've never had to do that, And so we worked on it together and he was definitely older. And it was like, well, do we want to put the dates he went to college? Because it was sort of like, is that going to be a detriment when people say, oh my gosh, you went to Michigan State how long ago? Like, I can't hire you because I'm ageist or whatever it is. So
Right.
I wonder if, speaking to certain, age demographics, you address that as well, like how to find a job when you're older like that. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, I think a part of it is it's a mindset thing. I
Yeah.
know, I mean, there is age discrimination that occurs out there. And, part of it is how do you present yourself? So let's just say, for example, Lynn, if I were to hold a bowl of something out to you and I say, smell this milk, does this smell sour? And
Uh-huh.
immediately you're even going in like scrunching your nose up. You're anticipating some type of a rancid scent. As I said, does this smell sour? And you're like, oh gosh. Versus if I held the same bowl out to you and I said, smell this Greek yogurt. Doesn't this smell amazing?
Right.
And fermented milk and rotten milk and Greek yogurt are the same thing. It's just the way that I said it out there.
Yeah.
So, and if we look at, I'm not going to name names of national leaders throughout the world are in their 70s,
Yes,
heads of
true.
countries and things like in our government and different
Mhm.
places and things like that. So, we can work until the time that we don't want to work anymore. We don't have to just work until employers say you no longer have any useful value. Well, that's their perception of
Sure.
the useful
Yeah.
value. And I've been doing job seeker groups for a while and I've been running throughout the pandemic. We do a Friday job seekers office hours. And there was this one guy, his name's David. He was in his 80s.
Mhm.
And he came into our call week after week and he ended up booking me for a one-on-one coaching session. And I had to ask the obvious question, like we're all thinking it, like, David, do you need to work? Do you want to work because you have benefits or like,
Yeah.
can you retire? And he's like, I'll be honest with you, Brenda, I'm not ready to retire yet.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I still got some life left in me to give. And I feel like I still have some expertise to give to a company. David ended up getting a job, Lynn, and he is still working to this day, as far as I know. And,
Mm.
I just think about the company that hired him. They're getting somebody who is productive, who wants to be there, who knows he
Yeah.
wants to work, who bring such a great wealth of knowledge about
Yeah.
how to work with customers and people and team members. You don't have the same issues that you do with younger employees where
Sure.
they've got like one eye on the when am I getting the next promotion or competing against salary and all these and like David is probably, if the company will allow him to do so, he'll probably work there until he is ready to retire. He's never going to leave
Mhm.
that company.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think part of it is when you go back to do you put your age on your college degree on your LinkedIn profile? You don't need to. It's not a
Mhm.
required field.
Right.
LinkedIn is a marketing tool. It's not a job application. If they say fill out this job application and put your dates of when you attended college and when you worked at company, that's a legally binding document. You have to fill it in.
Yeah.
So you don't need to put it in there. I mean, we can tell. I mean, even if we get on a Zoom call we interview you, we know you're no spring chicken. We know that you've got some years against you.
Yeah.
But I think it's a bit in that orientation. And I've
Yeah.
even, had some people that I've interviewed with throughout my career and they've addressed the issue. I know you're looking for somebody with 3 to 5 years of experience, and you're probably wondering, why does someone like me want to apply for this job? Well, let me tell you why. Because
Yeah.
I am experienced, because I know what I want to do. I know that you're only looking for 3 to 5. I know that I have many more than that, but I applied for this job because I think I can bring something to you to offer
Sure.
that to you. So I
Sure.
think it's part of what we need to do is position ourselves in the right light. And I mean, you can't fight the people that are going to discriminate you upon age anyways, but I think you can merchandise the fact that your age and your experience is a strength, if that makes sense.
I love it. No, it's all mindset. Absolutely. So before our conversation comes to a close, I wonder if you might offer any advice to listeners who would like to write a business book.
Yeah, great question. I think if you're thinking about writing a business book, that means that you know that you have a topic out there that is of interest to people. And maybe you're a speaker and you're already speaking about this topic and you're thinking, I've given this talk so many times, there has to be a book in me to write about it. My advice is if you're thinking about writing a book, I use this whole approach of involving my audience. Even before I started thinking about writing a book, I would post about it on LinkedIn. I would poll my email list. I would get ideas. I had interviews with people as well. I actually created a book marketing checklist, Lynn, and I'll give it to you in case you want to put it in show notes, but it's like
Yeah.
pre book launch. Here are the things that you can do once the book launches, what you do afterwards as well. But I think making sure that you don't get too caught up in everybody's already written a book about this, because that was in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't create LinkedIn. And I mean, if you look on Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
there's thousands, maybe not thousands, maybe hundreds of books on LinkedIn. So what
Yeah.
makes my book unique and different is me. I
Mm-hmm.
had to get to that point. Like what's going to make it different is my angle or take on it. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of people who are thinking about writing a business book, we have to think about that we all are offering some similarities in our approaches in the
Mm-hmm.
industry or topic, but it's almost like looking through a kaleidoscope, Lynn, and your view of it is going to be slightly different than my view.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think if you can take your unique point of view and blend it into that topic,
Mm-hmm.
making sure there's an audience for the book rather out there, I think that
Mm-hmm.
can really help you out.
That's amazing. Well, Brenda Meller, thank you so much for being on the Make Meaning podcast. I'm going to add in the show notes all the links so everybody can find you. They can watch you on LinkedIn Live. They can buy your book. And definitely we want to share that book marketing checklist. So thank you for offering that. But again, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
It's been a pleasure, Lynn. Thank you so much again for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast with Lynn Galadner. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like what you've heard, subscribe and share this episode with the meaningful people in your world. And please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more at makemeaning.org or lynngaladner.com.